Well, the Supreme Court is going to weigh in on the Lisa Cook saga. Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this is The Breakdown. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Legal AF for all things law and politics. So, the Supreme Court has moved to allow Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook to remain on the central bank board until 2026, saying that they're going to take up the president's appeal seeking to remove her for cause during a hearing in January. So, backing up, here's a recap of all that's been going on with this case. So, there were allegations made by Bill Pulte, who is the director of the Federal Housing Finance Authority. He made the allegation that Lisa Cook committed mortgage fraud. Now, both AP and Reuters viewed her real estate documents and confirmed that the allegation is not true, okay? But we all know in this administration, truth is quite elusive. So basically, Bill Pulte made these allegations, also referred the case to the Department of Justice. Lisa Cook has not been charged at all, and she maintains that this is politically motivated. Now, who is Lisa Cook? Lisa Cook is the first African-American woman to serve on the board of the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve, they're the people who are in charge of interest rates. And this whole beef is because the president wants the Federal Reserve to drop interest rates in the hope of stimulating the economy. Well, the Federal Reserve is like, yeah, if we do that, we're going to go headfirst into a recession. And the Federal Reserve was designed for the purpose of being completely out of politics. So the president can appoint people to the board, but they serve very long appointments for the purposes of the fact that they can't be swayed by politics. This is basically a nonpartisan position, and it's about the numbers, not about who appointed you. So she's voted in line with the rest of the Federal Reserve Board. So it's not like she's out here doing something crazy. She's, and of course, she's also one of the most prominent Black economists in this country. So it's not like she came here as a slouch. She came with both barrels loaded. So Bill Pulte, who over here is just throwing out allegations at people, he did the same thing to New York AG Letitia James. He's just, again, being lockstep with this administration, just throwing out allegations, and the president uses that as the basis to be able to remove people from office. So, what is actually at issue here? Lisa Cook has 3 homes. She has one that's designated as a vacation home, and she has 2 that are regular homes, so to speak. The allegation is that she declared those other 2 homes both to be her primary residence for the purposes of getting a better interest rate. Well, again, AP and Reuters looked at the documentation, and she made it very clear that one of those homes was not going to be her primary residence. So she disclosed to the lender that this was not going to be her primary residence, that the one which would be her primary residence, she designated that. And then she also had a vacation home. So she very clearly stated what purpose each home was going to have. So there was no fraud. The lender was well aware of the purposes of each property and gave her mortgages accordingly. She actually had higher interest rates than the prevailing rate at the time that she got those mortgages. So again, clearly no fraud. But interesting to note, Reuters reported that Pulte, that Director Pulte, the one who started all this drama, his own father and stepmother had declared 2 homes in 2 different states to be their primary residences. So the town in Michigan where they had one of the homes had to remove a tax exemption for their home there and charge them for back taxes. Oh, did he turn in his parents? Was there an investigation? Yeah, didn't think so. And of course, Director Pulte and his family had no comment on the matter. Dude, why don't you work on what's going on in your own backyard before you start to throw shade on other people, right? So at the end of the day, This Supreme Court case is going to really address the limits of the power that the president has to remove people. The president claims he can remove anybody for cause at any point in time, and something that's unsubstantiated can serve as cause in his opinion. So let's see what the Supreme Court says about this in January. I'm hopeful because of the fact that, number one, they're taking this up, because they could have punted and been like, no. We've also seen in other types of, like the labor board and all of that, where the Supreme Court deferred to the president and said, hey, you can fire whoever you want, go have at it. But because of the gravity of this role with the Federal Reserve, and that literally a misstep could mean our entire financial structure collapses, the Supreme Court's like, okay, we're going to take a minute and we're going to actually look at this and give a ruling. So we will see what the ruling ends up being. But again, to me, all the indications are there that this is going to be a ruling in Lisa Cook's favor. So we'll stay tuned on that. But before I go, I'm always about dropping a nugget of knowledge. So speaking about notable firsts of African Americans in government, in law, and all of that, want to talk to you about George Hardy. Now, Lieutenant Colonel George Hardy was the youngest fighter pilot of the Tuskegee Airmen, which is the nation's first set of Black military pilots. He has passed away. He passed away at the ripe age of 100. He was the last surviving combat pilot of the Tuskegee Airmen who went overseas. Now, before World War II, African Americans were not allowed to serve in the Air Force. But in 1941, the Tuskegee Airman Unit was established by the U.S. Army Air Corps as the 99th Pursuit Squadron based at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. And so these military pilots served in a segregated World War II unit, and they're all Black. 332nd Fighter Group had one of the lowest loss records of all the bomber escorts in the war. Now, we're talking 1939 to, 1945, with our main involvement being after Pearl Harbor, 1941 to 1945. So they had the lowest loss records, meaning they didn't lose pilots, they didn't lose planes. Now, several white leaders in the U.S. Army Air Force tried to prevent the Black pilots from having combat duty and banned them from using club spaces. So the Tuskegee Airmen are like, what? Obviously, civil disobedience and all of that. They are literally putting their lives on the line and were not treated as equals. So going back to Lieutenant Colonel Hardy, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant at the age of 19, and he flew his first combat mission before he had even driven a car. He ultimately completed 21 World War II missions, meaning he flew into enemy territory. He was out here fighting for our rights. And he subsequently flew 45 missions in the Korean War and 70 in the Vietnam War. He was quoted as saying, "I used to say that the Army's number one job was segregation. Winning the war was number two." So it would be really nice. I mean, I'm thinking in the context of the director of, war, whatever, Pete Hegseth is over here, gathering generals and talking about N-words and all of this, right? Well, maybe if Hegseth could focus on proud moments and the sacrifice of all of our service people, instead of condemning Wade and, talking about transgender folks and, throwing shade on female members of our service, going after, these generals should be doing XYZ, doing stuff that he couldn't even dream of doing. Yeah, he would have gotten a better reaction if he was focusing on some of the good that our armed forces have done. Just saying, And at the end of the day, listen, I don't think anybody wants to see obese service people, because you're thinking about the fact of how effective are they going to be in the field and all of that. PT test for everyone? Cool, fine, no problem. But riddle me this. I mean, I'm no expert on military law or military requirements, but last time I checked, there was no exemptions to PT or, basically the physical tests because of rank. So I always thought that even if you're brass, you had to be within a certain height or weight range. Like, someone please correct me if I'm wrong. I really want y'all to sound off in the comments, especially if you served, right? Because, if it's already the standard, then how is Hegseth going to enforce something that's already a standard? Again, not my wheelhouse, but I got questions. And, again, want to hear from the folks who have served because, listen, at the end of the day, much respect for everybody who put their lives on the line for our freedoms. We want to hear from y'all. We want to make sure your voice and your insights are heard because this is a crazy time that we're in. And as we're looking at First Amendment and all of these other rights that we have held close that are integral to our democracy, it's the service people who made sure we had that. They fought for that. They fought enemies outside. But now we're dealing with the enemies within. I'm going to just leave it there for now. I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this was The Breakdown. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Legal AF. Take care.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.